Welcome to wisdom and blessing. In this quiet moment, the body may soften and the breath may begin to slow. Tonight's story speaks to those who tried with sincerity, effort, and hope, and still feel they failed. It explores the gentle difference between striving and surrender, and how peace often arrives only after effort is released. As the night deepens, the story begins. Night settled gently over the mountain valley, as it often did, without urgency or sound. Mist moved slowly between the pine trees, and the river below reflected fragments of moonlight, broken and rejoined by the current. Along its bank, a narrow path curved upward toward a small monastery built of dark wood and stone. Inside the monastery grounds, a single lantern burned. The monk had been awake for many hours. He stood at the edge of the river, his robe drawn close against the cool air, watching the water move past him. The river did not hesitate. It did not question its direction. It flowed with steady persistence, shaped by the land, yielding where it must, pressing forward where it could. The monk did not feel like the river. For years, he had believed effort was the answer. Effort had been his offering, his discipline, his quiet promise to himself. He rose before dawn, meditated longer than instructed, studied texts until his eyes ached. When others rested, he continued. When doubt appeared, he pushed harder, and still, something felt unfinished. In the small wooden boathouse near the river, a narrow rowing boat rested in the water, tethered by a rope worn smooth with use. Each morning, before the monastery bells sounded, the monk untied it and rowed upstream. It was a task he had given himself, a form of moving meditation. Upstream was difficult. The current resisted. Each stroke required attention, strength, persistence. At first, the effort had felt noble. Over time, it became heavy. That morning, long before the sky began to lighten, the monk had taken the oars into his hands once again. His palms knew their shape intimately. The wood was cool, familiar, marked by years of contact. He pushed the boat into the river and began to row. Stroke after stroke, the boat moved slowly against the current. Water pressed hard against the hull. The sound of effort filled the narrow space between river and breath. His mind, however, did not quiet. Thoughts arose like stones beneath the surface. Memories of instruction, silent comparisons with other monks, questions without answers. Why does clarity not come? Why does the heart still feel tight? Why does effort feel endless? With each pull of the oars, his body strained, but it was not the body that tired first. It was something deeper, something that had been holding itself upright for too long. Halfway upstream, the monk paused. The boat drifted backward slightly, obedient to the current. He tightened his grip and pulled again, correcting the drift, refusing to lose ground. His jaw clenched. The muscles in his arms burned. The river did not change. A quiet sense of failure surfaced, not loud, not dramatic, just a familiar heaviness settling behind the chest. He had tried. He had tried sincerely, and still the river remained the river. When the sun finally rose, pale and distant behind cloud and mist, the monk returned the boat to the shore. He tied the rope carefully, as he always did, and stood for a long time without moving. Other monks passed him on the path, their footsteps soft, their faces calm. None stopped. None needed to. This was not a moment that required words. Later, as the day unfolded, the monk carried that same weight into the meditation hall. He sat straight-backed, legs folded, breath steady. He followed each instruction exactly, and yet Beneath the stillness, there was strain. Meditation felt like rowing upstream with the mind. Each wandering thought was corrected. Each sensation was controlled. Each moment was effort layered upon effort. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the session, relief appeared, and immediately shame followed. Relief meant weakness. Weakness meant failure. That afternoon, the teacher noticed. The teacher was old, though no one in the monastery remembered exactly how old. He moved slowly, but never seemed delayed. His presence carried the weight of someone who did not rush, not because of age, but because there was nothing to outrun. The teacher said nothing at first. He simply walked beside the monk toward the river. They stood together where the water bent around a curve in the land, its surface smooth in places, turbulent in others. "You row every morning," the teacher said gently. The monk nodded. "Upstream." Another nod. The teacher watched the river for a long time before speaking again. "Does the river ever thank you for your effort?" The question landed quietly. The monk lowered his gaze. "No." "Does it ever notice?" Silence stretched between them, unbroken. The teacher picked up a small leaf from the ground and placed it on the water. It drifted easily, turning once, then settling into the flow. "No effort," the teacher said. "No resistance." The monk felt something tighten in his chest. "But the leaf goes nowhere on its own," he replied. "It simply follows." The teacher smiled, not in agreement, not in correction. "Exactly." The river carried the leaf out of sight. The lanterns would be lit again that evening. The oars would wait in the boathouse. The current would remain. And somewhere, just beneath the monk's driving, something quieter had begun to stir. Not an answer, not yet, but a pause, a space where effort might finally be set down. That evening, the monastery settled into its familiar rhythm. Bells echoed softly through corridors darkened by dusk. Wooden doors slid closed. Footsteps faded. Somewhere, water was heated for tea, and the scent of herbs drifted faintly through the air. The monk did not join the others right away. He remained near the river, seated on a flat stone worn smooth by time. The water moved endlessly past him, carrying reflections of lantern light that stretched and broke, then disappeared. He watched without trying to understand. The teacher's words returned, not as sound, but as weight. Exactly. The monk had repeated that word silently many times since the afternoon. Exactly what? Exactly why effort hurt? Exactly why striving felt endless? Or exactly why surrender frightened him more than failure ever had? For most of his life, effort had been safety. Effort meant direction. Effort meant worth. Effort meant there was still something he could do. To stop striving felt like stepping into water without knowing how deep it was. Later, in the meditation hall, the monk took his seat among the others. The room was dim, lit only by a single candle near the altar. Shadows stretched along the walls, breathing with the flicker of flame. He sat as always, straight spine, steady breath. But something was different. When a thought arose, he noticed the familiar impulse to correct it, to push it away, to row against its current. The impulse appeared automatically, shaped by years of discipline. And then, unexpectedly, the impulse hesitated, just for a moment. In that pause, the monk felt uncertainty spread through him. If effort stopped, what remained? If control loosened, what would surface? His chest tightened. The thought passed on its own, not because it was managed, not because it was defeated, but because it was allowed to finish. This unsettled him. After meditation, sleep came unevenly. Dreams surfaced and dissolved, fragmented and unclear. He woke before dawn, as usual, but did not rise immediately. He lay listening to the sounds of the monastery, the soft creak of wood, the distant call of a night bird, the breath moving in and out of his own body. The oars waited. The habit was strong, stronger than intention. Before the sky had fully lightened, the monk found himself at the river again. He untied the boat, stepped inside, and sat facing upstream. The oars rested in their locks. For a long moment, he did nothing. The current pressed against the hull, nudging the boat gently sideways, then pulling it back. The river did not demand action. It did not rush him. His hands closed around the oars. The first stroke came automatically. The second followed. Muscle memory guided him forward, inch by inch. The familiar resistance returned, immediate and undeniable. Water pushed back, breath shortened, and with it came the familiar voice, quiet but relentless. Try harder. You are losing ground. This is how progress is made. The monk pulled again. His arms trembled, not from weakness, but from something deeper beginning to loosen. The effort felt exposed now, stripped of its certainty. Each stroke no longer felt noble. It felt anxious. He paused midstream. The boat drifted backward. Panic rose suddenly, sharp and uninvited. Stopping meant failure. Drifting meant losing everything gained. His grip tightened. The teacher's leaf came back to him, weightless, unafraid. Without fully deciding to, the monk released one oar. The boat turned slightly, unstable. He released the other. Silence. The river took hold. At first, the sensation was unbearable. The boat moved without instruction, guided by a force he was not directing. His body tensed, ready to correct, to intervene. But nothing catastrophic happened. The boat drifted, not wildly, not dangerously, simply forward, carried by the current he had been fighting every morning. His breathing slowed, surprised. The river did not rush him. It did not test him. It did not care whether he tried or not. As the boat glided downstream, the monk felt something unfamiliar spread through his chest. Not relief, exactly, but release. A loosening of a knot he had mistaken for strength. Images surfaced quietly, moments of striving, years of silent self-judgment, the constant belief that peace must be earned through exhaustion. Tears appeared without warning. They did not come from despair, they came from recognition. The monk realized he had been rowing not toward awakening, but away from rest. When the boat finally touched the shore near the monastery, the monk stepped out slowly. His legs felt unsteady, as though learning a new way to stand. The teacher was there. He had not approached. He had simply been present. The teacher looked at the boat, then at the monk. "You didn't fail," the teacher said softly. "You stopped mistaking strain for sincerity." The monk bowed, deeper than before. Something had shifted, not resolved, not complete, but real. That day, the monk still performed his duties. He swept the paths. He carried water. He listened when spoken to. But underneath each action, something quieter moved. Not effort, not collapse, but trust. And the river continued, unchanged, patient, carrying everything that no longer needed to be held. Morning arrived without ceremony. Light filtered gently through the trees, touching the monastery roofs, warming the stones along the path. Birds moved between branches, unhurried. The world continued exactly as it always had, but the monk did not. He noticed it first in small ways. The weight in his chest was different, not gone, but loosened, as if something once clenched had relaxed its grip without fully opening. When he walked, his steps no longer rushed ahead of his breath. When he paused, the pause did not accuse him of wasting time. Still, uncertainty lingered. Surrender, he discovered, was not peaceful at first. It was exposed, without effort to lean on. The monk felt strangely visible, to himself more than anyone else. During morning chores, he swept the stone path leading to the meditation hall. The broom moved rhythmically, bristles whispering against stone. Normally, his mind would have filled the silence with instruction. Be mindful, be precise, do not drift. Now, there was only sound, sweep, step, breath. A thought arose, a familiar one. If effort is released, what remains of discipline? The question lingered like mist. At midday, the teacher invited the monk to walk beyond the monastery grounds, along a narrow trail that followed the river downstream. The water here moved more slowly, wide and calm, reflecting the sky with quiet clarity. They walked in silence. The monk waited for instruction, for correction, for explanation. None came. After some time, the monk spoke. "If I stop pushing," he said carefully, "I'm afraid I will disappear." The teacher stopped walking. He knelt near the riverbank and reached into the water, lifting a smooth stone. It fit neatly into his palm, shaped by years of contact with the current. "Did the stone disappear?" the teacher asked, when it stopped resisting the water. The monk considered the question. "No," he said, "it became this." The teacher placed the stone back into the river. It settled quietly, unmoved. "Effort is not the enemy," the teacher said, "but clinging to effort is." They continued walking. That night, sleep came more easily. Dreams were fewer, softer. When the monk woke before dawn, he noticed the familiar urge to rise immediately. And, for the first time, he questioned it without judgment. He stayed still. Breath entered. Breath left. Nothing needed correction. Later, in the meditation hall, he sat again among the others. His posture was slightly less rigid. His attention was softer around the edges. Thoughts arose, doubts, memories, old habits. But they no longer felt like intrusions. They were simply movements. At one point, a deep rest settled into him, unexpected and unfamiliar. Not sleep, not effort, something between, a quiet. The monk felt a subtle fear arise alongside it. If this rest deepens, will ambition vanish? If striving fades, will meaning follow? The bell rang. Days passed. The monk did not row upstream again. Instead, each morning, he sat near the river and watched. Sometimes he placed a leaf on the water and followed it with his eyes until it disappeared around the bend. Sometimes he did nothing at all. Other monks noticed the change, though none commented. The monk's movements had softened. His listening deepened. He spoke less, and when he did, his words were slower, as if shaped by space. One afternoon, while carrying water from the well, the monk stumbled. The bucket tipped, spilling water across the stones. Old instinct surged, sharp, immediate, careless, unacceptable. The judgment rose fully formed. And then something new happened. The judgment passed. The monk stood still, surprised. Water soaked into the ground. The bucket lay on its side. The world did not collapse. He picked up the bucket and continued. That evening, the teacher spoke again. "You believed failure was the worst thing that could happen," the teacher said, "but exhaustion was already teaching you otherwise." The monk nodded. For the first time, he did not feel ashamed of how hard he had tried. He saw it now, the sincerity, the devotion, the longing for peace. None of it had been wasted. It had simply reached its natural end. Effort had carried him to the river. Surrender was teaching him how to float. The moon rose slowly over the water, round and unhurried. Its reflection shimmered, breaking with each ripple, then returning. Nothing was being held. Nothing was being lost. And in the quiet, after letting go, the monk began to understand, not with the mind, but with the body, that peace was not a reward for endurance. It was what remained when endurance was no longer required. The change did not announce itself. It appeared quietly, in glances from other monks, in the way conversations paused just a moment longer than before. The monk sensed it without being told, the subtle shift that follows anyone who stops striving in a place built on discipline. He was no longer the first to rise, no longer the last to leave the hall, no longer the one others silently measured themselves against. At first, this felt like relief. Then, unexpectedly, it felt like loss. Ordinary. The words surfaced one afternoon as the monk watched two novices practicing their chants. Their voices wavered, uncertain but earnest. He remembered his own early days, the intensity, the hunger, the quiet belief that effort alone would carve meaning into his life. He had believed greatness was forged by strain. Now, sitting on a stone bench beneath a cedar tree, he wondered what remained when that belief dissolved. If effort had been his identity, who was he without it? That night, the monastery gathered for a longer meditation. Candles lined the walls, their flames steady, almost motionless. The air carried the scent of old wood and melted wax. The monk took his seat. As the room fell into silence, a new discomfort arose. Not the old agitation, but something subtler. Insignificance. Without striving, he felt small, unremarkable. Just another body breathing among many others. The mind reached instinctively for comparison, searching for something to grasp. Others are deeper. Others are more devoted. Others are closer to understanding. The thoughts felt hollow now, but they still came. He did not push them away. He let them sit. Beneath them, another feeling revealed itself. Grief. Grief for the image he had carried for so long, the monk who would one day arrive, complete and unquestionable, purified by effort. That image had been comforting. Letting it go felt like standing without armor. After the meditation, the teacher invited the monk to walk again, this time not toward the river, but into the forest behind the monastery. The path narrowed quickly, branches brushing against their robes, leaves crunching softly underfoot. They walked until the sounds of the monastery disappeared. The teacher stopped near a clearing where fallen leaves covered the ground in uneven layers. "Pick one," the teacher said. The monk knelt and chose a leaf at random, brown, curled at the edges, unremarkable in every way. "Why that one?" the teacher asked. "There was no reason," the monk replied. The teacher nodded. "Exactly." He gestured around them. "Do you see how many leaves are here?" "Yes." "And yet," the teacher continued, "does the forest mourn those that are not noticed?" The monk looked again. The ground was rich with decay. Life fed quietly on what had fallen. Nothing was wasted. Nothing asked to be special. The monk felt something soften. For years, he'd been trying to matter in a way the forest never demanded. Back in the monastery, days continued their gentle repetition. The monk still practiced, still sat, still served. But the sharp edge of ambition no longer cut through his actions. At times, fear returned. Fear that surrender would make him passive. Fear that ease would dull him. Fear that peace would erase purpose. But each time, the river answered without words. The monk noticed something else too. When others spoke, he listened more deeply. When novices struggled, he did not rush to correct them. When mistakes happened, he no longer felt the need to assign meaning. Ordinariness, he discovered, was spacious. One evening, as rain fell lightly on the monastery roof, the monk sat alone near the doorway, watching droplets gather and fall. Each drop left no trace, yet together they fed the earth. He remembered his years of effort, the strain, the exhaustion, the silent shame of never feeling complete. He did not regret them. They had brought him here, but he no longer needed to prove that he deserved rest. The teacher joined him, sitting without speaking. After a long while, the monk said quietly, "I thought surrender would make me disappear." The teacher smiled. "It removes the costume," he said, "not the person." Rain continued to fall. The monk felt ordinary, and for the first time, ordinary felt like enough. The rain ended sometime before dawn. The monk woke to a silence so complete it felt deliberate, as if the world had paused to listen to itself. He lay still, aware of breath moving gently through the body, aware of the weight of the blanket, aware of nothing else needing to happen. In the past, such stillness would have been an invitation to act. Now, it was enough to remain. When morning arrived, it did not pull him forward. It simply arrived. He rose, washed his face, and stepped outside. The stones along the path were darkened by rain, reflecting the pale sky. A thin mist hovered close to the ground, blurring the edges of trees and buildings alike. Nothing was sharp. Nothing demanded clarity. The monk noticed his steps were slower, but not hesitant. Each movement seemed to complete itself without supervision. Hands lifted, feet placed themselves. Breath found its own rhythm. He was no longer guiding the day. The day was carrying him. During morning practice, the meditation hall felt different, not quieter. It had always been quiet, but wider. Space seemed to extend beyond the walls, beyond the bodies seated within it. Thoughts came and went like distant birds, faint and unimportant. At one point, a memory surfaced, an old moment of failure from before the monastery, long before robes and vows. The memory arrived without warning, fully formed. The monk waited for the familiar reaction. Shame did not come. Correction did not come. The memory passed, untouched. Something inside him registered this absence, not with celebration, but with recognition. Like noticing a long-standing ache was no longer present only after reaching for it out of habit. Later that day, the monk was asked to help repair a section of the outer wall. He worked beside another monk, younger, diligent, still carrying the sharp focus of someone trying very hard to do everything correctly. The younger monk worked quickly, checking each stone twice, brow furrowed with concentration. When a stone slipped slightly out of place, he stiffened, frustration rising visibly. "I'm slowing us down," the younger monk said quietly. The older monk paused, watching the wall. "We're not going anywhere," he replied. The words surprised him as much as they surprised the other. The younger monk looked at him, uncertain, then nodded and continued more slowly. The wall was completed by late afternoon. It was not perfect. No wall ever was. Still, it stood. As evening approached, the monk returned to the river alone. The water was higher from the rain, its surface textured and alive. He watched it closely, not searching for lessons, not asking questions. Movement revealed itself naturally, Even in stillness, the river moved. Even without effort, it shaped the land. The monk understood something quietly then, something effort had never taught him. Action did not require strain. Direction did not require force. The river did not push. It responded. As days passed, this understanding deepened. The monk found himself acting without planning, speaking without rehearsing, resting without justification. Tasks were completed, conversations held, mistakes made, all without the heavy overlay of self-monitoring. This unsettled him at first. Without striving, how would he know he was progressing? The question arose less frequently now, and when it did, it dissolved quickly, like mist under sunlight. One night, the teacher spoke again. "You are beginning to trust what moves without being pushed," the teacher said. The monk nodded. "It feels dangerous," he admitted, as if something could go wrong at any moment. The teacher smiled. "Something always can," he said gently. "That was never prevented by effort." The monk felt the truth of this settle into him, not as resignation, but as relief. Later, lying awake beneath the quiet roof, the monk noticed a subtle joy, not happiness, not excitement, but a gentle ease spreading through the body. The kind of ease that does not announce itself, that does not seek attention. The joy of not holding. He realized then that stillness was not the absence of movement. It was movement without resistance. The next morning, a breeze passed through the monastery courtyard, lifting leaves and setting wind chimes softly ringing. The sound was light, almost playful. The monk paused to listen. He did not follow the sound. He did not analyze it. He simply let it pass through him. And in that passing, life continued, unforced, uninterrupted, carrying him forward without asking whether he was ready. It returned quietly, not as a voice, not as a memory at first, but as a familiar tightening beneath the ribs, subtle and precise, as if an old visitor had stepped across the threshold without knocking. Shame had not forgotten the monk. He noticed it one morning while pouring tea. His hand paused mid-motion, just long enough for the surface of the liquid to tremble. A thought followed, soft but unmistakable. "You are becoming careless." The monk set the teapot down. In the past, that thought would have taken root instantly. It would have multiplied, drawing strength from memory and habit. Careless becomes lazy. Lazy becomes unworthy. Unworthy becomes failure. But now, the thought hovered without anchoring. The monk watched it as he would watch a leaf on the river, present, visible, moving. It did not attach. Still, the body remembered. Later that day, during a teaching session, the monk was asked a simple question by a novice. He answered honestly, without embellishment. The teacher nodded, but offered no praise. A familiar heat rose in the monk's face. Once, this absence would have been painful. It would have confirmed an old fear. That effort was the only thing making him visible, valuable. Shame tried again. "You are fading." The monk felt it fully this time, the impulse to shrink, to correct himself, to prove something unnecessary. The muscles in his shoulders tightened, preparing for a defense that was no longer required. And then, nothing. The feeling reached outward, searching for something to attach to. There was only breath, only sound, only the room as it was. Without resistance, the sensation dissolved. The monk was surprised, not by its disappearance, but by how little effort that disappearance required. That evening, he sat alone near the edge of the monastery courtyard. The stones beneath him were cool. The sky above was vast and unremarkable. Stars appeared slowly, without ceremony. He reflected on how shame had once shaped his entire life. It had worn many disguises: discipline, perfection, humility. But beneath each disguise had been the same belief, that something was wrong with him unless corrected by constant effort. The river did not believe this. The forest did not believe this. The night sky did not require improvement. Why had he? The teacher approached without sound and sat beside him. "Old patterns return when they sense unfamiliar ground," the teacher said calmly. The monk nodded. "They feel convincing," he replied. "Even now." "Yes," the teacher said, "because they were built to survive." The monk considered this. Shame had once kept him striving. Striving had once kept him safe. He bowed his head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. "I don't hate it anymore," the monk said after a while. "I just don't follow it." The teacher smiled. "Then it will have to find another home." Days passed. Shame appeared again, while carrying supplies, while listening to others speak, while resting in the afternoon sun. Each time, it arrived as sensation first, thought second, and each time, it found no place to stay. Without a story to attach to, it weakened. Without resistance, it shortened. Without belief, it lost its authority. The monk noticed something else as well. When shame dissolved, what remained was not pride. It was neutrality, a quiet honesty. He could see his limits without flinching. He could see his strengths without clinging. He could make mistakes without turning them into identities. One afternoon, the monk dropped a bowl. It shattered cleanly on the stone floor. The sound echoed sharply. Several monks turned. The monk stood still, no rush of apology, no tightening of the chest, no internal collapse. He knelt, gathered the pieces, and cleaned the space. Nothing more was required. That night, the teacher spoke one final time on the matter. "Shame only survives where something is still being defended," he said. The monk understood. There was nothing left to defend. As the monk prepared for rest, he felt a quiet gratitude, not for peace, not for insight, but for the simple fact that effort was no longer required to be acceptable. The river flowed, the body breathed, life continued, and shame, finding no place to land, moved on. The shift was subtle enough that the monk did not notice it at first. Tasks were still performed, bells still rang, paths were still swept, bowls still washed, prayers still spoken. From the outside, nothing appeared different, but inside, something fundamental had rearranged itself. Effort was no longer sharp. It no longer carried urgency or self-judgment. It did not push against time or measure itself against outcome. It moved slowly now, like hands caring for something fragile. The monk noticed it while tending the small garden behind the monastery. He knelt in the soil, fingers darkened with earth, pulling weeds one by one. Each root released with a soft sound, a gentle surrender from the ground. There was no rush to finish, no thought of being observed, just attention, care. In the past, care had been mixed with fear, fear of failing, fear of not doing enough, fear of being exposed. Now, care felt clean. It arose naturally, without commentary. When a plant leaned too far toward the shade, he adjusted it. When the soil felt dry, he watered. When something was done, he stopped. Nothing asked for more. Later that day, a novice approached him with a troubled expression. The novice spoke hesitantly, choosing words carefully. "I keep trying," the novice said, "but I feel like I'm doing it wrong." The monk listened fully. In the past, he might have offered instruction, a method, a reassurance framed as advice. Instead, he said only, "What does trying feel like?" The novice paused, surprised by the question. "Like pressure," he said. "Like holding my breath." The monk nodded. "Then breathe," he said gently. The novice looked confused, then thoughtful. He bowed and left without another word. The monk returned to his work, feeling no need to follow up, no need to check if the advice had helped. He trusted that care, when offered cleanly, did not require supervision. As evening approached, the monk walked along the river path once more. The water moved steadily, carrying reflections of trees and sky. He noticed how the river adjusted naturally to stones and bends, not with effort, not with resistance, but with response. Care looked like that, not forcing, not abandoning, responding. That night, during meditation, effort appeared briefly, a familiar tightening, a subtle urge to improve the moment. The monk noticed it with kindness. "Oh," he thought quietly, "you're still here." The sensation softened. Effort was no longer an enemy. It had become a signal, a reminder to relax into care. Days unfolded with a new quality. The monk still rose early, but not from compulsion. He still practiced diligently, but without the inner demand to become something else. When fatigue appeared, he rested. When energy returned, he acted. Care did not argue with reality. One afternoon, while repairing a roof tile, the monk slipped slightly, catching himself just in time. His heart jumped, then settled. He laughed softly, not from relief alone, but from recognition. The body knew what to do. The moment adjusted itself. Control had not saved him. Presence had. That evening, the teacher spoke again. "Effort that is fueled by fear tightens the world," the teacher said. "Care that is fueled by presence opens it." The monk bowed. He understood now why surrender had felt so frightening. It had required trusting something quieter than ambition, something less dramatic than discipline. Care did not promise arrival. It promised participation. As the monk prepared for rest, he noticed how naturally the day had completed itself. There was no sense of unfinished business, no urge to replay moments in search of correction. The body was tired, the mind was clear, the heart was open. Care had replaced striving, not as an achievement, but as a way of being. And somewhere deep within, the monk felt the truth settle gently. Failure had never been the problem. Fear of being unworthy without effort had been. Now, care remained, steady, responsive, enough. Something began to answer back, not dramatically, not as reward or sign, but in small, almost forgettable ways, the kind that might pass unnoticed by someone still pushing forward. The monk sensed it one morning while walking the outer path of the monastery. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet stone and leaves. As he stepped aside to allow another monk to pass, their shoulders brushed lightly. The other monk smiled. It was brief, unremarkable, and yet it lingered. In the past, the monk might have wondered what it meant, whether it reflected approval or judgment, whether he had earned it. Now, it was simply received. Life, it seemed, was no longer something to be managed. It was responding on its own. During the day, tasks unfolded with an unfamiliar ease. A door that usually stuck opened without resistance. A misunderstanding resolved itself before tension formed. A conversation ended naturally, without the need to extend or control it. None of it was extraordinary. That was the point. The monk began to notice how often life had been offering these small accommodations all along, moments of alignment, gentle openings, and how effort had once blinded him to them. He had been too busy rowing. That afternoon, he was asked to accompany a group of visitors through the monastery grounds. They moved slowly, pausing often, asking simple questions. The monk answered without haste, without rehearsing, allowing silence when words were unnecessary. One visitor stopped near the river and said quietly, "It feels peaceful here." The monk looked at the water. "It moves," he replied. "That helps." The visitor smiled, satisfied without further explanation. As the group left, the monk felt no depletion, no sense of performance, no need to recover. Care had carried him through the interaction. Life had met him there, halfway. Later, while preparing tea, the monk noticed his reflection in the surface of the water. His face looked softer, not younger, not wiser, simply less guarded. Lines remained, history remained. Strain did not. He remembered how often he had believed that peace required isolation, effort, or withdrawal from the world. Now, peace seemed to arise precisely because he was no longer standing against it. In the evening, the teacher joined him near the river once more. "You've stopped interrupting what's already happening," the teacher said. The monk nodded. "It feels cooperative," he said, searching for the right word. "Yes," the teacher replied. "Life responds when it's no longer being corrected." They sat in silence. A fish broke the surface briefly, then disappeared. Ripples widened, faded. The monk noticed that when he no longer demanded certainty, moments seemed to offer just enough guidance. Not answers, direction, not control. Relationship. That night, as the monk prepared for rest, he felt a quiet anticipation, not for what would come, but for the simple fact that he no longer needed to brace himself against it. Life, once resisted, now approached gently, not because he had earned it, but because he had stopped pushing it away. For a long time, failure had not been an event. It had been a name. The monk saw this clearly now, as he sat beneath the old fig tree near the eastern wall of the monastery. Its roots pushed through the stone, slow and unapologetic, reshaping the ground over decades without asking permission. Failure, he realized, had once been the way he explained himself. It had followed him quietly, attaching itself to effort, to rest, to moments of doubt. It had whispered that every pause was a mistake, every ease a weakness, every unanswered question proof of inadequacy. Now, it had begun to lose its voice. The monk noticed the change during a simple exchange with another monk. They were carrying baskets of grain together, their pace unhurried. One basket slipped slightly, spilling a small amount onto the ground. "Ah," the other monk said, stopping. The monk waited. No rush of explanation came, no apology formed, no internal verdict was delivered. They gathered the grain and continued. Later, the monk paused, surprised by the absence he felt. Failure had not appeared, not even faintly. That evening, during meditation, an old memory surfaced. A moment from years before the monastery, when a plan had collapsed publicly, leaving him exposed and ashamed. The memory arrived fully intact, vivid and detailed. The monk felt it in the body first, a warmth behind the face, a tightening at the throat. Then something unexpected happened. The memory did not attach to the present. It did not become a story about who he was now. It was simply something that had occurred. He watched it fade, like smoke thinning in open air. The teacher spoke later that night, addressing the group as a whole. "Failure," the teacher said, "is only heavy when it becomes an identity. The monk felt the words settle inside him. Failure had once felt permanent because he had believed it described him, not something that passed through his life. He walked to the river after the gathering, carrying a small stone in his hand. He tossed it gently into the water and watched the ripples form, then disappear. The stone did not remain a ripple, neither did his past. In the days that followed, the monk noticed how often people around him spoke of themselves using the language of success and failure, as if these words were fixed points rather than passing states. I'm not good at this. I always mess things up. I never get it right. He listened without correcting, without disagreeing. He recognized the weight those words once held for him, but now the words felt loose. Failure no longer described his worth. It described moments, and moments, he had learned, did not define rivers. One afternoon, the monk attempted a task he had avoided for some time, teaching a small group of novices. In the past, teaching had stirred anxiety. The fear of being unclear, insufficient, or wrong had always followed closely behind. This time, he spoke simply. When he didn't know an answer, he said so. When the novices struggled, he waited. Nothing collapsed. No judgment arrived. Afterward, one novice said quietly, "That was helpful." The monk nodded, receiving the words without grasping. As evening fell, the monk returned to the fig tree. He touched its bark, rough and steady. The tree had failed many times, branches broken, leaves lost, seasons endured. Still, it stood. Failure, the monk understood now, was not something to escape. It was something to stop wearing. The night deepened, the river flowed, and the monk, no longer named by his past, rested in the simple truth that effort had ended, and what remained was enough. The monk noticed it one morning while tying his sandals. There was no urgency in the movement, no hidden expectation beneath it. The simple act completed itself and ended, leaving nothing behind that asked to be reviewed or improved. Nothing was being demonstrated. Nothing was being protected. This absence felt unfamiliar, not empty, but quiet in a way that did not echo. For most of his life, even inside the monastery, there had always been something to prove. Prove sincerity, prove discipline, prove worthiness. Even peace had once felt like an accomplishment to be earned and displayed. Now, that structure had collapsed, and nothing bad had followed. The monk walked the courtyard slowly, aware of sunlight warming the stone beneath his feet. A group of novices passed him, laughing softly about something trivial. He did not compare himself to them. He did not measure where he stood in relation to their joy or ease. The moment was allowed to belong to itself. Later, the monk was asked to assist with a ceremony, a public one attended by visitors and elders from nearby monasteries. In the past, such occasions had tightened something in him. Visibility had always carried risk. This time, the body moved calmly. He prepared the space carefully, placing each object where it belonged. Not perfectly, simply attentively. When this ceremony began, he stood where he was asked to stand and spoke when it was time to speak. His voice did not strain. His posture did not announce humility or authority. He was present. Afterward, someone thanked him. The monk bowed politely and continued walking. The words did not attach. As the day wore on, the monk sensed a deeper truth unfolding, one that effort had long obscured. When there was nothing left to prove, mistakes lost their edge. When there was nothing left to defend, criticism passed through lightly. When there was nothing left to achieve, action became sincere. In the late afternoon, the teacher called the monk to the river once more. They stood together in familiar silence, watching water pass stone after stone, unimpeded. "You're no longer rowing," the teacher said. The monk nodded. "You're also no longer drifting," the teacher continued. The monk felt the truth of this. He was standing without resistance, standing without performance. The teacher picked up a stick and drew a single line in the damp soil, then gently brushed it away with his foot. "When you stop proving," he said, "life stops testing." The monk looked at the place where the line had been. There was nothing there now. That night, lying beneath the quiet roof, the monk felt the deepest rest he had known. Not the rest of sleep, but the rest of not carrying a question into tomorrow. He did not wonder who he would become. He did not rehearse what he should have been. The breath came, the breath went. And in the space between, the monk understood, not as an idea, but as a settled knowing, that the long struggle had not been a mistake. It had simply run its course. Effort had brought him to the river. Surrender had taught him to float. And now, with nothing left to prove, life was free to meet him exactly as it was. They returned when he least expected them, not with force, not with urgency, but with familiarity. The monk noticed it during a simple morning task. He was arranging cushions in the meditation hall, aligning them loosely in a circle. One cushion sat slightly crooked. The angle caught his eye, small and precise. A familiar impulse rose. Fix it. Make it right. Someone will notice. His body leaned forward before thought completed itself. Then he stopped. The impulse was still there, clear, habitual, efficient, but something else was present too: space, choice, awareness that did not rush. He adjusted the cushion gently, not to correct a flaw, but to care for the space. Nothing tightened, nothing followed. Peace did not leave. This surprised him. He had once believed that peace required constant vigilance, that a single lapse in attention would allow old patterns to reclaim the ground he had gained. Now, peace remained even as habits briefly surfaced. It did not shatter, it did not retreat, it simply observed. Later that day, while walking the outer path, the monk passed a group of visiting elders. Their robes were darker, their bearing formal. One of them spoke with authority, recounting accomplishments and years of training. The monk felt the old comparison rise, automatic and quiet. They have gone further. They are more accomplished. The thought appeared fully formed, and then it passed, without struggle, without correction. The monk continued walking, breath steady, step even. Peace did not require the thought to disappear. It only required that it not be followed. That afternoon, a mistake occurred during meal preparation. The soup was oversalted, noticeably so. A few monks exchanged glances. Someone sighed. Once, the monk would have absorbed the moment, like a verdict. Responsibility would have hardened into self-blame. Now, he tasted the soup, nodded, and added water. The flavor softened. No story formed. The day continued. As evening approached, the monk sat alone beneath the same fig tree he had visited many times before. Its leaves rustled gently, stirred by a breeze that came and went without warning. Old habits, he realized, were like that breeze. They passed through. They did not define the tree. The teacher joined him, settling into silence first, then speaking. "Patterns do not disappear," the teacher said. "They loosen." The monk nodded. "I thought peace meant they would stop coming," he replied. The teacher smiled. "Peace means you don't have to go with them." The monk felt the truth of this sink deeply into his body. Peace was not a fragile state. It was not something to defend or preserve. It was the ground that remained when nothing else was being chased. That night, as the monk lay down to rest, a familiar restlessness stirred briefly, a sense that something was unfinished, unresolved. He noticed it. He did not engage. The restlessness faded, leaving behind a softness that spread through his limbs. Sleep arrived naturally. The monk understood now that old habits might visit again, tomorrow, next year, even in moments of great clarity. But they no longer carried authority. They no longer defined him. They no longer demanded obedience. Peace remained, not because the mind was perfect, but because nothing needed to be. The question did not disappear. It softened. For much of the monk's life, certainty had been the quiet demand beneath every action. Certainty about the path, certainty about progress, certainty that effort would eventually deliver something solid and permanent. Now, that demand had loosened. One morning, as fog drifted low across the monastery grounds, the monk walked the familiar path toward the river. The world felt unfinished, edges blurred, distance unclear. The river itself appeared and disappeared between folds of mist, present one moment, hidden the next. He realized how deeply this scene would once have unsettled him. Unclear meant unsafe. Uncertain meant wrong. But standing there now, the monk felt no urge to resolve the view. He waited. The fog moved on its own. Certainty, he saw, had always been an attempt to control time, to force tomorrow into a shape the mind could rest inside. Without it, the present felt wider, more honest. Later that day, during study, a novice asked him a question about a passage they had been reading. "What does this teaching truly mean?" the novice asked. The monk looked at the text, then at the novice. "I don't know," he said. The novice blinked, surprised. Then the monk added, "But we can stay with it." The novice nodded slowly, relief replacing confusion. They sat together in silence, the book resting open between them. Nothing was concluded. Nothing needed to be. The monk noticed how often certainty had masqueraded as wisdom in his life, how answers had been used to quiet fear rather than illuminate truth. Now, not knowing felt clean. In the afternoon, the teacher spoke to a small group beneath the trees. "Certainty closes the hand," the teacher said. "Presence opens it." The monk felt the words settle. Without certainty, he listened more closely. Without certainty, he noticed subtle shifts in tone, in mood, in the way moments asked to be met rather than solved. That evening, the monk returned to the river again. The current was stronger today, the surface restless. He watched a branch float briefly, then turn, then disappear. He did not wonder where it would end. He did not need to. Certainty had once promised safety. Now, trust offered something quieter and deeper. That night, as the monk rested, a thought appeared. What if something goes wrong? The thought hovered. Then it passed. Something always could. And still, breath continued. The monk drifted into sleep with a gentle understanding that life did not require certainty to be lived fully. It required attention. It required care. And that was already here. For a long time, meaning had felt distant. It had been something the monk searched for in effort, in discipline, in the promise that one day all the pieces would align and reveal why everything had been worth enduring. Meaning had seemed like a destination, somewhere further along the path just beyond reach. Now it appeared differently. One morning, while helping repair a loose step near the meditation hall, the monk noticed how carefully his hands moved. Not because the task was important, not because anyone was watching, but because attention had settled there naturally. The wood fit into place with a quiet finality. He stepped back. The step held. There was no surge of satisfaction, no sense of accomplishment. And yet, something felt complete. The monk paused, surprised by the simplicity of it. Meaning, he realized, was not announcing itself. It was arising quietly inside ordinary moments that no longer needed to point somewhere else. Later, he sat beside the river as the light shifted across the water. Birds skimmed the surface, touching it briefly before lifting away. Their movements were effortless, unburdened by purpose beyond the moment itself. The monk remembered how often he had demanded that life explain itself. Why this path? Why this failure? Why this exhaustion? Now, those questions no longer pressed. Meaning did not answer them. Meaning replaced them. That afternoon, the teacher asked the monk to accompany him to the far edge of the monastery grounds, where the land dipped gently toward open fields. They walked slowly, stopping often, not because of fatigue, but because there was no need to rush past what was already here. "You once searched for meaning," the teacher said quietly. The monk nodded. "And now?" the teacher asked. The monk considered the question carefully. "It keeps finding me," he said. The teacher smiled. They stood together, watching clouds shift and thin. The sky was vast, unconcerned with interpretation. The monk understood something then, something that effort had never allowed him to see. Meaning was not hidden because life was cruel. Meaning had been hidden because he had been hunting it. Hunting required tension. Tension narrowed vision. Without that tension, meaning did not need to be chased. It appeared in responsiveness, in care, in presence that did not demand more. That evening, during a shared meal, laughter arose unexpectedly at the table. It was not loud, not particularly funny, but it spread naturally, unforced. The monk laughed too, not because the moment was significant, but because it was alive. Later, alone in his room, the monk reflected on the long arc of his striving, the years of effort, the exhaustion, the quiet belief that failure had ruined something essential. He saw now that nothing had been ruined. The struggle had brought him to stillness. Stillness had revealed care. Care had opened meaning. And meaning, once released from pursuit, had returned gently, like an old friend, no longer asked to perform. As night settled over the monastery, the monk lay down without anticipation or regret. There was nothing he needed tomorrow to justify today. The breath came and went. The river flowed unseen but steady, and meaning, no longer hunted, rested everywhere, in small repairs, shared silence, unanswered questions, and the simple, honest presence of being here. Self-blame did not leave all at once. It softened the way stone softens under water, not by argument, not by force, but by long contact with gentleness. The monk noticed it one morning as he folded his robe. A familiar thought appeared, almost affectionate in its familiarity. "You should have understood this sooner." Once, that thought would have tightened the chest immediately. It would have replayed years of effort, mistakes, and delay, turning hindsight into accusation. Now, the monk paused. He felt the thought fully, its weight, its shape, and then noticed something beneath it. Sadness, not regret, not judgment, but tenderness. He had tried so hard, for so long, with sincerity, not arrogance, with devotion, not laziness. Blame, he realized, had been a way of honoring that effort, a misguided way, but human. Later that day, the monk walked with the teacher through a section of forest where the path was uneven and slow. Roots crossed the ground without apology, forcing each step to adjust. The teacher stumbled slightly, then laughed softly. "Even the ground doesn't blame itself," the teacher said. The monk smiled. Self-blame had once felt like responsibility, like proof of seriousness. Without it, he had feared becoming careless or shallow. But now he saw the truth. Self-blame did not improve him, it only hardened him. In the afternoon, the monk was asked to sit with an elder visitor who was quietly grieving. No story was shared at first. They sat together, listening to wind move through leaves. After a long silence, the elder said, "I keep thinking I should have known better." The monk did not correct him. He did not offer philosophy. He said only, "You knew what you knew then." The elder closed his eyes. Something eased. As evening approached, the monk returned to the river. The water was low and clear, revealing stones beneath the surface, smooth, varied, resting exactly where the current had placed them. None were in the wrong place. The monk felt a final knot loosen. Self-blame had always asked an impossible question. Why weren't you already who you are now? The question dissolved. He could see the path clearly at last. Effort leading to exhaustion, exhaustion opening surrender, surrender revealing care, care allowing peace. Nothing had been skipped. Nothing had been delayed. Each stage had arrived when it could. That night, as the monastery quieted, the monk lay down without reviewing the day. There was no inventory of mistakes, no tally of progress, only breath, only rest. And in that rest, self-blame, having lost its sharpness, faded into something softer, almost kind, a memory of how deeply he had wanted to be free. The night thinned quietly. It did not end. It softened. Somewhere beyond the monastery walls, the sky began to lighten. Not enough to be called morning, only enough to suggest that darkness was no longer complete. The monk lay awake, not because sleep had fled, but because there was nothing urging him back into it. Breath moved gently. The body rested. No thought asked to be followed. When he rose, it was without decision. The floor was cool beneath his feet. The robe settled easily across his shoulders, familiar and unremarkable. Outside, the air held the clean stillness that comes just before birds remember themselves. The monk walked to the river one last time. Mist hovered low over the water, erasing distance, blurring origin and destination into the same pale breath. The current moved steadily beneath it all, unseen but unmistakable. He stood without posture, without intention, without need. For a moment, a long one or a short one, it did not matter. There was simply standing, simply listening. Water touched stone, air touched skin. The world completed itself without his help. The river did not ask who he was. It did not remember who he had been. It flowed. The monk felt something settle fully now, not as understanding, not as realization, but as a deep bodily ease, the kind that arrives when a long labor finally sets itself down, not with relief, but with quiet trust. He saw his path clearly, without story, the years of effort, the exhaustion. The moment the oars were released, none of it felt mistaken. Each step had been necessary to arrive at this simplicity, a simplicity that could not be reached directly, only lived into. The monk bowed slightly to the river, not in gratitude, not in reverence, but in recognition. Then he turned back toward the monastery. Lanterns would be lit soon. Tea would be poured. Voices would rise softly and fall again. Life would continue, unchanged in its forms, yet lighter in its holding. As he walked, the monk felt no need to carry the story of failure with him, no need to remember who he had tried to be, no need to preserve what had been learned. What mattered had already entered the body. A gentleness that did not collapse, a care that did not strain, a peace that did not depend on silence. The sun touched the horizon at last, not dramatically, not urgently, just enough light to dissolve the mist, to reveal the river again. The same river, no longer fought, no longer followed, simply known. The monk disappeared into the quiet movement of the morning, and the river continued without a name, without resistance, carrying nothing that needed to be held. As the breath deepens, as the body settles, there is nothing left to understand. Only this, only now, only the soft, steady flow that has always been here. The days that followed were ordinary. This was the first thing the monk noticed. Not peaceful in a remarkable way, not luminous, not filled with insight or quiet joy, just days. The monastery bells rang at the same hours. The kitchen fires were lit and extinguished. Sandals gathered dust by the door. Birds argued in the trees, then forgot why. The monk moved through it all without carrying the sense that something important had ended or begun. That too was new. For most of his life, moments had always pointed somewhere else, toward improvement, toward meaning, toward repair. Even rest had once been temporary, allowed only so effort could resume stronger. Now, moments pointed nowhere. They simply occurred. The monk swept the courtyard one morning and noticed how the dust returned even as he cleared it. He did not feel irritation. He did not feel resignation. He swept again later. The broom did not complain. Neither did the ground. At midday, a novice asked him, "Is this what it's supposed to feel like?" The monk looked at the novice carefully. "What?" he asked. The novice hesitated. After understanding, the monk considered. "It feels like life," he said. The novice frowned slightly, unsatisfied, then bowed and left. The monk did not feel the need to follow. That afternoon, clouds gathered unexpectedly. Rain came fast and heavy, drumming against the roofs, flooding the lower path near the river. Some monks rushed to move supplies. Others stood watching, uncertain. The monk joined them, lifting what needed lifting, leaving what could wait. Water soaked his robe. He did not mind. Rain ended as suddenly as it had begun. Steam rose from stone. The river swelled, brown and impatient. Nothing was learned. Nothing was lost. That evening, as the monastery settled again, the monk realized something quietly unsettling. Without striving, without shame, without meaning to hunt or identity to protect, life felt lighter, but also less dramatic. There were no peaks, no collapses, no story to tell himself about progress. This unsettled a part of him that had not yet spoken. Later, lying awake beneath the dark roof, the thought finally emerged. Is this all? It was not asked in despair. It was asked honestly. He did not answer it. He noticed the question rise, hover, then soften into the dark, like breath dissolving into air. Morning came. The monk rose. The question did not return. Instead, something subtler appeared, a quiet intimacy with whatever was directly in front of him. Not fascination, not reverence. Contact. When he lifted a bowl, he felt its weight fully. When he listened, he did not prepare response. When fatigue came, he rested without explanation. Nothing resisted, nothing demanded. One evening, the teacher passed him in the corridor and paused. "You're still here," the teacher said. "Yes," the monk replied. The teacher nodded, as if that was enough. They did not speak again. Weeks passed. Visitors came and left. Some sought answers, some sought peace, some sought confirmation that they were not failing at life. The monk offered tea. He offered silence. He offered nothing more than presence, and people left feeling strangely unburdened, though no one could say why. One night, as the monk stood again by the river, he noticed something he had not before. The river did not feel like a teacher anymore. It did not feel symbolic. It was just water moving, and this, too, was right. He realized then that the deepest surrender was not dramatic. It was remaining ordinary without needing escape, not seeking transcendence, not fearing simplicity, just staying. The monk turned away from the river and walked back toward the monastery lights. The path was uneven. He adjusted his step. Nothing more was required. Desire returned quietly, not as hunger, not as longing, not even as thought. It arrived as a slight leaning forward in the body, a gentle tilt toward something not yet present. The monk noticed it while washing his bowl. His hands moved as they always did, slow and attentive. Water slid over ceramic, carrying traces of rice and broth into the basin below. The bowl came clean. His hands did not stop. For a moment, they lingered. The sensation was faint, almost polite. A subtle wish that the moment would stay just a little longer, that the ease he felt might continue without interruption. Desire. He smiled without judgment. Once, desire had been loud and relentless, disguised as ambition, improvement, spiritual hunger. It had demanded answers, outcomes, arrival. Now it appeared stripped of urgency, recognizable, almost innocent. He dried the bowl and set it aside. The sensation faded. Later that morning, while walking the outer path, the monk saw the river through a gap in the trees. Sunlight struck the water at an angle, breaking into silver fragments that drifted and recombined with the current. The sight was simple, beautiful, but not extraordinary. Still, the body leaned again. A wish formed, not to possess the view, not to explain it, but to remain within it. The monk paused. He felt the desire fully, without tightening, without grasping. He did not turn away. He did not indulge it. He simply stayed present with the leaning. The wish softened. The body straightened. The moment passed. He continued walking. In the days that followed, the monk noticed these small movements of desire more frequently, a preference for a quiet seat, a gentle disappointment when rain interrupted a task, a slight satisfaction when tea tasted particularly warm and grounding. None of it felt dangerous, but it was unmistakable. Desire had not disappeared. It had transformed. This unsettled an old question in him. Had surrender been temporary? Was effort merely resting before returning? The monk did not answer the questions directly. Instead, he observed. Desire no longer commanded action. It suggested, and suggestion could be heard without being obeyed. One afternoon, a visitor arrived, a young man with restless eyes and an urgent way of speaking. He bowed deeply, then spoke quickly, as if afraid the words might escape if delayed. "I've been trying to let go," the visitor said, "but desire keeps coming back. Does that mean I've failed?" The monk poured tea slowly. "No," he said. "It means you're alive." The visitor looked confused. The monk continued, "The problem was never desire. It was believing desire had to be followed." They sat together in silence. The visitor's breath slowed. His shoulders dropped slightly. When he left, he bowed again, not as deeply this time. That evening, the monk sat near the river once more. The water moved faster now, fed by recent rain. Branches and leaves drifted past, sometimes catching briefly on stones before freeing themselves and continuing on. The monk saw himself in this movement. Desire would arise. It would touch the moment. Then it would move on. Nothing was required to stop it. Nothing was required to feed it. The body understood this before the mind ever could. Later, during meditation, a deeper desire surfaced, quieter, more complex. A wish to help, a wish to ease others' suffering, a wish to offer something lasting. The monk recognized this desire too. Once, it would have grown into obligation, identity, mission. Now, it remained gentle. Care did not need purpose to justify itself. Compassion did not require strategy. The monk let the desire rest inside him without building around it. It stayed. It softened. It became availability. Days passed. The monk found himself responding naturally to what arose. When someone needed guidance, words appeared. When silence was required, it came. When rest was needed, he rested. Desire moved beneath it all, not driving, not directing, simply coloring the moment with subtle preference. And life flowed anyway. One night, lying beneath the quiet roof, the monk noticed a final form of desire emerge. The wish to remain as he was now, to protect this ease, to preserve this simplicity. He smiled gently. Even this he knew could pass. He did not try to keep it. Sleep came, and in sleep, desire loosened its hold, drifting like everything else. Morning returned. The monk rose. Desire arose again, lighter, softer, no longer mistaken for command. It had found its proper place. For a long time, surrender had felt like an answer, not an idea, not a teaching, but a posture of being, a gentle yielding that allowed life to move without resistance. It had softened the monk's striving, loosened the grip of shame, and opened a space where care could arise naturally. But one morning, as the monk sat near the river before dawn, he sensed something subtle shift. Surrender itself had become familiar, comfortable, almost owned. The thought came quietly, without accusation. Even this is being held. The monk did not resist the thought. He did not cling to it either. He watched as the sky slowly lightened, the horizon barely visible through layers of mist. The river moved steadily, neither yielding nor resisting, simply flowing according to its nature. Surrender, he realized, was not something the river practiced. The river did not let go. It did not accept. It did not release. It simply was. This understanding did not arrive as insight. It arrived as relaxation. The monk felt something unhook inside him. Not effort, not desire, but the subtle identity of being someone who had learned how to surrender. Even that, he saw now, was a position. And positions, however gentle, still required holding. Later that day, during meditation, he noticed how the mind gently leaned toward ease, toward openness, toward allowing. There was nothing wrong with this, but there was also nothing necessary about it. The monk sat. Thoughts arose, sensations shifted, the body breathed. No stance was maintained, no posture defended. Even surrender was allowed to come and go. This felt different, more bare, more ordinary, without the quiet satisfaction of doing it right. At first, This bareness felt like groundlessness, a soft vertigo, as if something essential had been removed. But nothing collapsed. The breath continued. The body remained. Life did not withdraw its support. The monk understood then that surrender had been a bridge, necessary, compassionate, and temporary. It had carried him away from struggle, but it was not meant to be lived on. To stay on the bridge forever would be another form of stopping. That afternoon, the teacher approached him with a simple request. "Help prepare the guest room," the teacher said. The monk nodded. As they worked together, folding linens and opening windows, the monk noticed there was no inner commentary at all. No sense of effort, no sense of surrender, no sense of presence even. Just action completing itself. The teacher paused and looked at him carefully. "You're not leaning anymore," the teacher said. The monk smiled faintly. "I didn't notice when it stopped," he replied. The teacher nodded. "That's how it happens." In the evening, the monk returned once more to the river, though not out of habit or reflection. His feet simply carried him there. The water was low and clear. Stones beneath the surface cast gentle shadows, undisturbed by meaning or interpretation. The monk stood. Nothing was practiced, nothing was remembered, nothing was released. There was no sense of "this is it," no arrival, no conclusion. Only standing, only listening, only the quiet participation in what was already unfolding. A bird crossed the sky. The monk did not follow it with his eyes. The river curved away from sight. He did not imagine where it went. Even surrender now was unnecessary. Life required no agreement. It continued without asking. That night, sleep came without preparation. Dreams were faint and unremarkable. When the monk woke before dawn, he felt no orientation toward practice or rest. He rose because rising happened. He washed because washing occurred. He lived because life moved. And in this simplicity, there was nothing left to release. The day arrived without distinction. No change in weather marked it. No shift in mood announced it. No inner voice whispered that something important was about to occur. It was, by all measures, an ordinary day. The monk rose when the bell sounded. He washed his face, folded his robe, and stepped into the courtyard, where early light rested gently on stone. A few monks moved quietly between buildings, their silhouettes familiar and unremarkable. Nothing waited to be solved. Nothing asked to be understood. During morning tasks, the monk was assigned to clean a storage room that had gone largely untouched for years. Dust lay thick on shelves. Old tools rested where they had last been set down, their purpose long completed. He worked slowly. Dust lifted and settled again. Cobwebs fell. Light entered through a narrow window, revealing patterns that shifted as the sun climbed. There was no satisfaction in the work. There was no boredom either. The monk noticed this absence with mild curiosity. For much of his life, even the smallest tasks had carried weight, either as obstacles or opportunities, failures or successes. Now, the task simply unfolded. Clean happened. Time passed. At midday, the bell rang for the meal. The monk ate quietly, tasting the food without commentary. Around him, others spoke softly about weather, visitors, repairs. No teaching emerged, no insight formed. After the meal, the monk walked along the outer path, stopping briefly where the river bent away from the monastery. The water moved lazily today, reflecting sky without distortion. The monk watched. And then he stopped watching. His gaze softened. The river remained. In the past, this moment would have been unsettling. A day without reflection would have felt wasted. A mind without seeking would have seemed dull. Now, it felt complete. The monk realized something quietly profound. Nothing happening was not emptiness. It was fullness without narration. Later in the afternoon, a novice approached him hesitantly. "I feel like I'm not progressing," the novice said. "Nothing is happening." The monk looked at him kindly. "Yes," he said. The novice blinked. "Yes, yes," the monk repeated. "That's happening." The novice looked puzzled, then thoughtful. They stood together in silence for a moment. The novice bowed and left, carrying no clear answer, and somehow lighter for it. As evening approached, clouds gathered again, but no rain fell. The air cooled, lanterns were lit. The monastery took on its familiar evening shape. The monk noticed how the day had passed without leaving a trace. No memory demanded attention. No mistake lingered. No achievement asked to be remembered. The day had lived itself. That night, lying beneath the dark roof, the monk did not reflect on the day. There was nothing to review. No sense of having missed something important. Sleep came gently, and in sleep, the mind did not wander far. The monk understood then, not as thought, but as deep bodily knowing, that awakening was not a continuous state of insight or peace. Sometimes it was simply a day when nothing happened, and that was enough. Morning arrived, as it always did. Light touched the edges of the monastery roofs. Shadows loosened their grip on stone. The bell sounded once, then again, not to signal importance, but to mark continuation. The monk rose. There was no sense of beginning, no sense of ending. The body moved because movement was available. Breath entered and left without asking permission. The day opened, not like a door, but like a field already waiting. He stepped outside and felt the cool air settle against his skin. Somewhere nearby, water was heating for tea. A bird called once, then fell silent, as if realizing there was nothing more to say. The monk stood still for a moment. Nothing gathered inside him. Nothing prepared itself. For the first time, he noticed that even awareness did not need to be sharpened. It was already present, already wide, already unoccupied. He walked toward the river. The path was familiar, worn by years of passing feet. Stones pressed gently against the soles of his sandals. The river came into view slowly, curving through the land without announcement. It looked exactly as it always had, and yet something was unmistakably different. The monk no longer felt as though he were standing before the river. He felt as though he were standing with it, not merged, not dissolved, not separate, simply sharing the same moment. The river moved. The monk breathed. Neither required explanation. He remembered faintly the years of striving, the belief that something essential had been missing, that effort was required to earn what others seemed to possess naturally. He remembered exhaustion disguised as discipline, shame disguised as humility, fear disguised as purpose. Those memories arose like distant shapes on the far bank. They did not call him. Nothing in him leaned toward them. The monk realized then that the most persistent illusion had not been failure or desire or effort. It had been the belief that something was absent, that peace was elsewhere, that meaning was delayed, that wholeness depended on becoming different. Standing by the river now, that belief did not collapse. It simply was not there. Nothing replaced it, and that absence felt complete. Later that morning, the monk returned to the monastery and joined the others in their tasks. He carried water, he swept leaves, He listened when spoken to and spoke when needed. Nothing about him stood out, and nothing needed to. A visitor arrived just before midday, an older woman, quiet, with eyes that had learned patience the hard way. She sat with the monk beneath the fig tree without asking questions at first. After a long silence, she said, "I keep thinking there's something I should have figured out by now." The monk looked at her gently. "What if there isn't?" he asked. She considered this. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. They sat together without further words. When she left, she did not thank him. She smiled. The day continued. At some point, clouds gathered again. The light softened. Wind moved through the trees, lifting leaves and letting them fall where they wished. The monk noticed how effortlessly the world adjusted itself. No supervision required. As evening approached, the monk returned to his room and folded his robe carefully. The fabric rested where it was placed. He sat on the edge of his mat, feeling the quiet weight of the day settle without residue. There was no sense of accomplishment, no sense of peace achieved, no sense of having arrived. And yet, there was no longing for anything else. The monk lay down. Breath moved. Thoughts did not gather. The mind did not search for silence. Silence was simply there, like the space between sounds that had never been missing. Somewhere beyond the monastery walls, the river continued its path through the dark. It carried no lesson. It remembered no struggle. It flowed because flowing was what it did. And the monk slept, not deeply, not lightly, but naturally, as the body rests when nothing is being held. If a thought arose in the night, it passed. If a dream formed, it dissolved. Nothing was kept. Before dawn, the monk woke briefly. The world was still. Darkness rested easily against the windows. He did not rise. There was no need. In that brief waking moment, a simple truth was present, not spoken, not framed, not understood, just felt. Nothing is missing, not now, not ever. And with that, the moment released itself, and sleep returned without sound. The monastery would wake again. The river would move again. Life would continue again. And there would be nothing to add, nothing to fix, nothing to become. Only this, already complete, already here, already enough.